So we talked about this a second ago, but this thing of on the exit strategy, right? Like, how do we know, how do we present what the future value is going to be on the real estate? And the great thing about this deal structure is there is some definite certainty before the investor has to financially commit. So let's talk about this, because you have some known numbers when you go to this person, okay? Before they go and fund, before you get the loan, you have to know, here's what it costs for me to build it. You're gonna have a literal line item hard bid from your builder saying, here's everything done. You're gonna have permits ready, plans ready, hard bid for this. And the third part of that, you're gonna have an appraisal done that will say, okay, here's the future value of my building, not in 20 years, but in 9 months or 12 months when it's done, right? That's not that far in the future. It's gonna be roughly that number, right? Here's what it's gonna cost to build it. Here's what it's gonna be worth. And then also when I'm full and stabilized based on a market study, here's what my business is gonna be worth as well. So you're gonna have these numbers. It's cost me, 2.4 million, plus I'm borrowing some hard costs. Maybe I'm at like $3 million, okay? I have this number, I'm borrowing 3 million, and it came back at 5 or 6 million, right? With the real estate at 5 million, with the business at 6 million. There's spread there, right? Like you can show them, here, Mr. or Mrs. Investor, here is my appraisal. It is ready, right? Like that's what ours came back at, okay? Right? 3 versus 5.1 for the each mansion, and then an extra $1 million for the business once it's full and cash flowing about a year later. So there's safety there, because you can say, here is an independent third-party appraisal that's showing the market currently today. This is not me predicting the future. This is what it is worth today, and it'll be complete in 1 year from now or 9 months or whatever it is, right? So there's certainty in those numbers. You're going in saying, okay, well, if we have this extra strategy of 5 years from now, it's at least going to be this and definitely more, right? The market is appreciating. We're in a market that is growing, right? But we at least have safety knowing here is a certain number that has already come back to us. So the unknown numbers, right, is will it be worth 5 years from now or 10 years from now or 20 years from now? We have no idea, right? You can't guess that, but you can at least make a 95% assumption that it's going to be worth more in the future than what it is now, right? That you're going into a market, you're not going into Detroit and Michigan if people are moving out of that city, right? You're going into an area that is in the path of progress, that is growing. And honestly, what our niche is the future of what assisted living is. People are moving away from the big smelly facility, coming into a market like this. We are continuing to see increases in bed rates because, and then you have the baby boomer generation that we haven't even talked about, right? There's more and more demand, more and more people moving into this kind of market. So we can at least say, hey, you know what? I can't tell you what it's gonna be 5 years from now, but 5 years ago, stuff was selling at this, and it's 30% higher, right? If we are at 6 million and then 30% higher on that, that's an extra 1.8 million, right? Like we are expecting this kind of path, but at least we know certainty it will be this, but before you even have to financially commit. So let's talk about our last slide here, our exit strategies, because you're gonna say to your investor, hey, you know what? Here's what the time looks like. Here's when you're gonna get your money back, right? Like the deal is this. And honestly, you can structure it multiple different ways. You could say, I'm gonna own this for 20 years, hand it off to my kids, or I'm gonna build and sell it in 5 years, or we'll talk about these 3 different options here. So here, I think, are the most common exit strategies. And again, my entire intention is to make it so simple for you that you can say, yeah, I want to do this one, right? Or no, I want to do this one. Or maybe this one, and the second case, maybe this one here. But at least it gives you a couple pieces of ammunition to have in your tool belt there to say, you know what, Mr. Investor, when you ask this question, I have an answer ready, and I have new numbers behind it to show you here's how that's going to look. So let's talk about these 3 common exit strategies. Number 1, you're going to build and operate. Okay, you're going to build the mansion, you're going to run it yourself. You are the one, the deal maker here creating this. You're going to sell it in 5 to 10 years. You don't know when, but somewhere you're going to at least have it for 5 years and probably not longer than 10 years. I think that's a fair thing to say to somebody. Hey, you know what? We're going to at least do this for 5 years. We're going to build it. We're going to grow our reputation. It's going to be amazing. And then we're going to look at it from there, right? Maybe we have a conversation, you and I, as the investor and, the owner partner, to say, you know what? Do we want to do this then? Nah, maybe not. I'm really loving this. We're making amazing money. You're happy in this deal. Okay, let's keep going and let's reanalyze it at year 7.5. And then, I really don't think we're going to go past year 10, right? Like, I think by that time I'm going to be this age. I should have this much money. It's going to be worth this much. I may just sell off into the sunset or, move to Spain or whatever the hell you want to do, right? It's your exit strategy. So, but I think 5 to 10 is a very reasonable thing to say to an investor. And then during that period, right, you're going to be splitting the cash flow yearly. Okay, you have your operations company. It's making 500 grand a year. It's making 500 grand a year now. In 10 years, it's probably making like 750 or something. And you are going to be splitting that. Maybe it's yearly, maybe it's quarterly, maybe it's monthly. Kind of depends. That first year, it's probably not yearly. You're getting stable, but after that, maybe you just split it quarterly. And then you're going to have the real estate side in that. Year 5 or 7 or 10, when we go to sell, right, we're going to pay off all our debts and we're going to say, you know what? Okay, we sold this deal for $7 million. We had $2 million in debt. We have a $5 million gross profit here. You're going to get your percentage. I'm going to get my percentage, and boom, right? Like that's it. It's kind of that simple. Now there's going to be a bunch of different intricacies, but I would keep things simple. And that's really my goal for you to give you 3 simple options. Okay. I think that may be the most common. Let's talk about here the second option. You're going to build and you're going to operate. So, but there is a caveat here. So you're going to build and then you're going to perhaps cash out and refinance your investor, maybe after 3 years, maybe after 5 years, right? Like if you went this SBA 7A, there is a 3-year prepayment penalty, right? You could, potentially fastest, maybe build, stabilize, you're in year 2 and you'd have a 1% prepayment penalty. Maybe that's 30 or 50 grand or something like that. But most likely you say, okay, hey, we're going to get full, we're going to stabilize, we're going to have an appraisal at some point in the future between year 3 and year 5, right? During that time, we are going to be splitting the cash flow, right? The operations company, you're going to be getting your percentage, I'm going to be having my percentage. We're going to split that every year. But the intention is that, perhaps you do not want to be 5 to 10 years. Perhaps here's a play for us to have you as 3 to 5 years, because at some point I'm going to go and have an appraisal done. They're going to appraise the value of my building and the value of my business. And they're going to say, hey, these two things are together worth 6.5 or 7 million or whatever this number is, right? At that point, if you have a loan of $3 million, you could say, okay, well, we have a potential profit of the difference, okay? The difference of $4 million, and you have 15% equity, you're going to get this $600,000 payout, if I did the math right in my head. Here's the 600 grand to you. I'm essentially going to be borrowing an additional 600 grand on my cash out refinance, my second loan. Perhaps I paid off the SBA. I'm getting more competitive rates from my local commercial lender. Now I'm getting a lower rate, and perhaps I have all this equity in the deal. I can easily cover, hey, you know what? Here's a 600 grand. And perhaps based on the lower rates, maybe my payment's not even that much higher. And at that point, your investor's paid off, they are out of the deal, and you could say, you know what, this is now a long-term play that I'm going to hand off to my kids, right? My investor partners are out. I'm going to run this thing, and whatever it is, but it's essentially your investors are gone. This is a way, option 2, to say, hey, 3 to 5 years, and you can do this. And if you wanted to sell it in 3 to 5 years, you probably wouldn't do this deal. You'd probably just do deal number 1. But if you wanted to own it for longer than that, and your investor didn't, I would say this is your play. All right, option number 2. Option number 3, here is something totally different, but you can build and operate, okay, the same thing as option 1 and 2, but then you're going to rent the building, right? So I see a lot of times, especially with the bigger facilities, you go on LoopNet or some of these other ones where they are selling the real estate on a triple net lease. So this would be the play. You have built it, you've operated it, because you honestly still, if we're talking about SBA 7A, they're lending to an owner operator. So you can't go around that part of the operate part. So you're going to operate it for a period of years, get stable on there, and then you would still probably need to technically refinance out the SBA because it is a owner operator. It's a small business, right? It's not a real estate investment loan. So you'd have to refinance that out. And then you could potentially say, okay, you know what? I want to keep this thing as a passive investment. I'm getting $3 a square foot. I'm getting, 30 grand a month plus triple net or whatever the number is, right? My mortgage is, 15, I'm getting 30. I don't know what those numbers are, but right, like, okay, I'm going to have this cash flow here. and you can keep it and you can run it that way. You can just have a rental. But at some point you could say, you know what, just like the other big facilities that are selling these buildings on a triple net, right? Meaning that they have a lease and the tenant is covering everything. They are covering the taxes, the insurance, the maintenance on the building, and they're paying you a certain amount. You could sell that based on a cap rate, just like other apartments do, just like other commercials buildings do. They would say, okay, well, I have this income minus my expenses, and here's this cap rate of 6 or 6.5 or 7%, right? If you go on LoopNet, you can see some of these bigger buildings that they say, hey, there's 20 years left in this triple net, and we're selling at a 6 cap or something like that. And honestly, I think that is the biggest sale play in that perspective. You can have the highest amount, at least when I compare my area of Austin, Texas, and I look at other things around here, I'm seeing the biggest sale price from option 3, if you wanted to go on that perspective. So that still leaves you with you renting the real estate. You might be able to sell the operations company. Maybe you can sell or finance the operations company with a big down payment. Maybe it's combined. The person who is going to lease it is also going to take over and purchase the operations company, the name and the goodwill and the leases there, all that kind of stuff. You can consider that option as well, and maybe you have a win on both sides of this. So that's really my takeaway for you guys today. The objective is to give you a framework for putting these things together so you can go and look at the calculator, put in all your numbers and be like, yeah, it's pretty clear to me that I should be on path 1 or path 2 or path 3. And if I did, here's how I would structure it. I would offer this percentage. I know I need to raise this much money. And here are my other considerations for that.